I saw someone sent me a reel about this. I wanted to say it's a Morgellons toe, but that's not it. It's a Morton's toe, which I don't really like. I like Greek better.
We'll just call you Morton for now. Hey, Morton.
Get your Morton away from me. The condition of having a second toe that's longer than the big toe is known as a Morton's toe or Morton's foot. It's relatively common. Oh, I thought it was uncommon. Occurring in about 10 to 20% of the population, though it might seem rare depending on the people around you. Here's some interesting facts about it. It's genetic, inherited from your parents. People with Morton's toe may experience different weight distribution when walking, which can lead...
Is that why you waddle?
That's tight hips. In classic sculptures, especially those from ancient Greece, the longer second toe was considered aesthetically ideal. So it is Greek. This is so true. Footwear for people with this foot shape, finding comfortable shoes can sometimes be a challenge. The longer second toe may rub against the front of the shoe, causing discomfort or even injuries over time.
So you got to size up.
Just for the one toe.
You need some extra breathing room for that Morton toe.
Well, the thing is, you can't really tell I have that unless I straighten my feet out, which makes me wonder if I've been smushing it into shoes.
Yeah, you've been stunting it. It's not radical. It's not like, some of those pictures of the Morton toe, it's like an inch out. Yours is a subtle length difference.
A mini Morton.
Yeah. See, like a half size up, maybe.
A Morty.
Or maybe you can get somebody to make a specialized Morton shoe for you.
Yeah.
It's just got its normal shape, but then there's just this little bulge right where your toe is. It's just like an extra toe pocket. It's like a toe closet.
This morning I woke up, you know how you suddenly remember cringy shit you've done?
Yeah.
I suddenly remembered last month I think it was last month, but when I was at the grocery store and the man came up and he wasn't like an unhoused person or anything. I think he was just drunk and stumbled over from the bar, but he came up as we were leaving the co-op. And I told Lily to get in the car. And then I thought he just wanted money. So I was just giving him some money. And then he started crying and he asked me if I would pray for him. And then he got down on his knees.
Oh, yeah. And then you prayed for the man.
I prayed. And then I whipped out, Lord, we ask that you just cover this. Because I just.
You said Lord? You just dipped into your old Christian days, right? You know exactly how to pray the
like
demons
riding
out.
a bike.
What have we learned about our Yahweh figure, though? You were casting a demon in.
I just wanted him to not be knelt down in front of me in this parking lot so bad that I went into fight, flight, freeze, and fawn simultaneously. And what is the fastest path out of this situation is to get the prayer done. In Jesus' name, just please, for the love of God, get up. And then he stood up. And
Did you end it like that? In Jesus' name?
Yeah, it was like a file.
In Diddler's name.
And then I gave him some psychedelics. Yeah, it was all this talk about boundaries and individuality, and
it's put to the test sometimes in public. That's like I would fold there too. That
would you
people
pray?
pleaser side of me. I don't know if I would have. I maybe would have. I wouldn't have ended it in Jesus' name. I've learned my lesson, but I probably would have. But I think it's interesting because I don't we can talk about autonomy and individuality, whatever. And then when faced with certain things in public, especially a stranger, that they just, bulldoze you into a situation where if they say, it's like they put it on the line, hey, I need you to pray. Can you pray? And they're on their knees looking like they're, asking you to marry them. You want to be like, okay, let me just get rid of this. Like the only way out is through, let me just do what you need me to do, instead of being like, hey man, I don't do that. I can't help you, but like, can I help you in some other way? I'm not going to pray. And I'm not saying praying is bad, right? But it's I've had so many moments like that where I can, for the most part, be in my power and setting boundaries with people, but then certain scenarios happen so fast, it feels insane to try to say no or try to advocate for your individuality. It's just not me. I don't want to play this part for you. It's much easier just to like get it done and go out and be like, what the hell just happened?
Yeah.
I've had so many, though, regretful things that I have done because I've gotten that pressure. And I've looked back and been like, I should have just advocated for myself in that scenario.
I have like delayed processing though, where I have to process like some sort of autopilot takes over in situations like that. And before I did nervous system work, it was every social situation I would like dissociate and just like fawn. Now it's just incredibly awkward ones. But I had, and maybe I was keeping myself safe because this person was very drunk, and maybe my nervous system instinct to just keep it calm and chill. He didn't seem like violent drunk or anything, but he then stood up and started showing me like his driver's license and his bus pass and his library card and stuff. And there was a moment because he was like, well, but like he looked like someone who was at his day job earlier that day. Like he was well put together. And so then I was like, I'm being recorded. I think I am like, this is some sort of TikTok prank or something. And then I was like going back and forth between how to navigate that, between trying to have compassion for this person who's like either out of their mind or pranking me right now.
I'm so fearful of that when I watch TikTok and all of the complicated pranks that are occurring, that where somebody will just like put you on the spot so quickly and pull you through something. Watching people not be able to hold their own in that, and they bend and start doing something, wild out of your mind, that it's obviously a prank, but it's like, it is such an interesting social experiment. Like how much can you push someone's boundaries by taking the lead and kind of forcing them into that scenario? How will they respond?
Yeah.
And it's like, if you knew it was a prank, you would respond a different way, but it feels so real, and you can't see the camera. Then you end up kind of making an ass of yourself because they took advantage of like a vulnerability, I'm always so afraid that will happen. When I've seen them, I'm like, oh man, I don't know. I probably would have done that too. I would have made an ass of myself. And that's the dangers of people pleasing, really. It's like if you can't just hold your own no matter what and have compassion, take whatever route you need to, but
have a no.
Not play the other person's game.
Yeah. That reminds me of when the scammers called. The scams are so good now. The scams used to be really obvious, but now the scams are a little less obvious. But there's a scam where they call you and say that they are the local police and that you missed that is so embarrassing, that you missed a summons or something for jury duty, which I've been ignoring jury duty summons my entire life. Nothing's ever happened from it. And that now you need to come down to the station. And I wouldn't have fallen for this because I know a lot about how all this stuff works and how the justice system works. But I don't trust the feds. And when we were on drugs, the feds would do stuff like reach out and say, we have some of your stuff, or you just won some money or something. They had like scams like that where the feds would trick you into coming down and turning yourself
in.
Back in the day when I was around people that the feds would be interested in. And so this was like 2 years ago. I feel like this was right after the miscarriage, so I was also kind of out of my mind. And they originally asked for someone else I know. And I think that was what made me think there was something suspicious happening. And so then, they called someone else I knew first looking for me. And that's what made me get suspicious of what it was. And then we were in Nashville at the time, and I had witnessed a fatal motorcycle accident around that time and had talked to a Nashville sheriff or a Tennessee sheriff a couple times. And this guy sounded exactly like this. He did a very good job. This scam was very good. But I wouldn't have fallen for it if it wasn't for the fact that I don't trust feds. And so all of the things where the spidey senses were going off telling me something sketchy about this, because I have this bias towards not trusting the justice system, I just projected it onto them and ignored all the things that didn't make sense. So they had our address, obviously, and they were like, you didn't come in for this thing. Oh, we were selling the house. We were getting ready to move, is what it was. And so I was also out of my mind from that because we were having to leave for showings every 5 minutes. And then Phoenix and Lily had friends over or something. Anyway, so they were like, you missed the summons. We need you to come down. And I was like, on a Sunday. And then they were interchangeably they said it was a federal crime that I ignored this subpoena or whatever. But they wanted me to come down to the county thing. And I know enough about the justice system to be like, why would I be coming down to the county's sheriff's office if you're the feds? Right. Like, why would I not be going to a federal thing? And then they had an excuse for that. And then they didn't start asking me to grab money until I was almost to the thing. But I was just bitching at them the whole time. Like, yelling at the guy. And there were so many, like, you could tell it's a scam because they want you to stay on the phone. And also the feds just come to your house, or the cops just come to your house if there's but they're not doing that on Sunday. Ugh, it's so embarrassing. But that's just one of those things where like your prejudice, your biases can make you vulnerable to something, because I was so just annoyed with, I was like, well, you failed to get the subpoena to me. So this is a you problem. This isn't a me problem. I didn't get it. So do you have proof that it was delivered to me? And they're like, yeah, it was like, and I was like, well, it wasn't. So you need to figure that out. And I can't remember what made me feel like I needed to go do that anyway. I guess I felt like being a victim that day, because I should just, if I was in my power, to have been like, just fuck off.
It happens so quick too, in the way that they can hijack you. Like that idea that they had to keep you on the phone. There was like no way for you to kind of pull out of it for a moment
and process
it and go, wait, no, this is weird. This is all off. They're like keeping you on the phone, and then they have, pocketed answers ready to deliver for all your excuses that seem half like, okay, yeah, maybe that's right. And then, before you know it, you're getting the the Visa card and sending it to them. And then it's like, you don't have enough time to process it. It's really tactful.
Yeah. And in reality, if they hadn't have called this other person first, who had texted me and was like, these guys just called for me, I would have, what I thought was happening was I was being tricked into coming down there to be questioned about someone else's shit.
Right.
Is what I thought was happening. And I didn't think for a second that there was actually a subpoena from the feds that like, what, that's not how any of that works. And so I would have fallen for it. And then they kept just telling me I have to bring the money. And I was like, yeah, whatever with the money. And then it wasn't until I got very close to the place that they told me to go into a store and get a gift card. And as I was getting the gift card, or not, like a prepaid credit card. And as I was picking that up, I was like, there was some reason that I thought that might have been legit because they are weird. Like I have had to pay stuff to them before, and they usually want a money order, which is a little bit harder to get on a Sunday. And so it's kind of why I thought I was doing that. And then when you buy the gift cards, it literally says, and the only time they let me set down the card was they told me not to take the phone, or let me set down the phone, was they told me not to take the phone into the store. And it's just interesting now because I've done nervous system work since then. And it's interesting how much of the way that they talk and the way that they put pressure on things. Because I remember I was being a huge bitch to them. I like left the phone in the pantry for a while so that I could fucking bitch about it.
Yeah, it was so funny when I was watching this unfold because I have not had as much experience as you have, like with directly communicating with the feds or the police. I've had ridiculous shit. Like the worst thing is like when I was a kid skateboarding somewhere I shouldn't be. And then as an adult getting a fucking ticket for not wearing a life vest and then getting a warrant, for my arrest. But it's all very innocent. And so the way that you were being, I was skeptical too, but I was like, well, it's gotten past your discernment. So this must be, you've had experience with this. This must be relatively, normal. And the way that you were kind of, I could tell you were like back and forth in your head of like, is this fake? Is this real? The idea that they did contact that other person and had this like anchoring kind of proof behind it, I think was the thing that was jarring you. But I think it's funny then that you left and then the kids were, we had to tell the kids to wake up because I forget what it was. I think you needed to drive them somewhere. And so we had to delay it or whatever. Yeah. And so there was like creating drama in the house. Then you left. Then that person that they had contacted me and was like, hey, what's going on? Make sure she's okay. And I was like, yeah, I think it's fine. I don't think there's like, she's not getting kidnapped. But then I remember you were gone for like 40 minutes or something. And I was just, curious what was going on. I didn't know if you were going to come back. And then you texted me and were like, these motherfuckers, like, they fucking almost got me. And I love that the way you told the story was that then you finally, once you figured it out, you kept them on the phone and you were like, hey, really good job, guys. Like, nice fucking try. And then you just kept pushing them. They're like, no, ma'am. Hey, no, ma'am, we're going to come arrest you. And you're like, no, you're fucking not. Whatever you said was so funny because you just turned it around and started punking them, like keeping them on the phone, being like, this is, I'm not going to let you get away with this and I'm going to make fun of you and whatever. Yeah,
I wish I would have been home so I could record it because there are people who just fuck these guys over and it's really funny. But they had a second guy. Well, I went in, I bought the cards, and when you buy the cards, the actual like card reader thing says beware of scams, whatever. And so I said to the cashier, is one of the scams pretending to be the cops? And she said, I think you can spend them anywhere you use regular credit cards. And I was like, okay, cool.
Okay,
thanks.
Robot. Thank you.
It's very helpful. And then I get back into the car and I'm like, I get it. So close. Or no, they were like, do you have the card? Did you get the cards? And you can tell the like desperation because they're so close. Yeah. They're like, it's like playing the claw machine, right? Yeah. And it's like, it's picked it up and it's slowly carrying and now it's sliding out of your hand. They're like, okay, you're going to give us the code on the back. And I was like, no, I don't think I'm going to do that. I think this is pretty obviously a scam. You had me for a minute because I'm suspicious of the police, but this is insane. Like, I wouldn't be giving you all this. Why don't I just walk into the station and give it to you there?
Kept testing them. Like, okay, I'm going to go down there. I'll meet you.
And then they were like, no, we need to handle this first. Ma'am, you're going to get arrested if you walk into the station. And so then they end up pissing me off at some point. Well, then they call me back from the police station because they can like steal that number or whatever. And so he has his friend call me. And then that guy was very short-tempered. He should do some nervous system work. And so, I don't know, by the end, I end up yelling at them. Like, I was doing this sort of shit. You know what I mean? Like, I was doing fucking...
When you were in diapers.
When you were in diapers, you little bitch. Also, you might end up scamming someone who knows magic and end up cursed. And then I hung up the phone.
Nice.
I don't curse people, but I'm sure they are paranoid about that now.
Yeah, so this brings up an interesting, this might like segue into maybe something we can talk about more, is the depths and subtlety of deception, and on some levels somewhat of a like mind control element. Like how they could, and maybe they didn't know they were going to get this lucky to get somebody like you that has experience with the feds and has been able to like, in your earlier life, learn the ins and outs of how to navigate this, stronghold that the police and the feds all like kind of have on people. Because, like when you get pulled over to get a ticket, for most people, it's hard to not have your nervous system start to go into fight or flight because there's somebody that has like a power position over you, and you are potentially in this situation guilty of something, and you immediately, your heart starts to, beat fast, and it's hard to stay calm because of that energy that they like have over us, that you're vulnerable to certain states of manipulation. So it's somewhat of a mind control element that's very subtle, that, somebody that's a scammer and tactful with it, they can take advantage of that and make you do things that you wouldn't normally do. So the subtlety of that, where else does that exist in our reality, as far as, the way propaganda is rolled out, the way that there's constant kind of division being seeded into everyone through a fear mechanism of, it's mostly fear. I think it's like, who are the bad guys we need to get rid of? It's in so many places, I think, in reality. And one of the most interesting ones to me, which I feel like we all bump up against as we begin to seek and have this conscious journey of awakening, is where do we have one experience usually that catalyzes a awakening to some of the basic deceptions in reality, that the government maybe doesn't have our best interests involved. The religion I was following my whole life doesn't have any weight to it now. And then you start to see clearly that there's like some lies being disseminated, and you want to search for the ultimate truth. That's usually going to, consist of an emotional thing as well, right? Like when you're seeking truth and there's something that you uncover, there's an emotional effect that occurs that is some kind of bliss of like, oh, I'm figuring it out and I'm healing myself, And so where else does it exist? One of the things that we run into as like trying to awaken and spiritually align ourselves is that there's maybe more deception in those fields of the new age
movement, yeah,
of the like conspirituality, just conspiracies in general. And getting through that, traversing that level is very hard because it's emotionally activating as well. The emotional center, I think, in some ways, it's so powerful, but it's a vulnerability because it directs your life. Like whatever emotions that you're having with any decision tend to cloud out the analytical thinking of things. And that can be a benefit in some situations, but it's also something that's very subtle that I think it can be used to control people. And I think we've all had to go through certain levels of this deception within the awakening where you start to trust anybody that is saying they're channeling this information from Andromeda, or they, their higher self, their guides are saying this. And so there's no real way to prove that stuff, but we've learned previously in the, in growing and evolving consciously that there's a lot of the material, physical things that seem to have proof can't be trusted. So we want to just go ahead and trust the higher self, or like wherever this information is coming from. But how much deception is going on in that as well with the New Age in general? Like, there's half truths in all of it, I think, like, just as I could say now, I can, from my experience, look at the Bible and Christianity as something that I was duped by early on, because there was no encouragement to actually analytically think and kind of have questions of doubt to be able to unpack. It was always like, oh, you're thinking too much. You don't doubt the divine. What?
Oh, it's just how fucking stupid the whole, like how obvious it is that it's a control mechanisms. The way that it's like, don't think so much. Don't ask so many questions. I'm trying to remember in Mormon and the Meth Head, there was something about doubt your doubt.
Yeah. It's so stupid. It's so dumb. And it's like, if this is the ultimate truth, it should be able to hold strong on any kind of doubtful question. Let me ask a little bit of, probing questions here to trust the level of truth this is. But it's very rarely is there we start to open the discussion about it. It's just poo-pooed and like, you're thinking too much and the mind is the devil. So don't let your mind do that. Yeah. And then that's convincing. You're like, okay, yeah, I can kind of understand that. Like, I do think myself into knots sometimes, and maybe this is something that I can't understand because it's so damn divine and so out there. So, okay, I'll stop. And so I feel like I got duped by that for a long time. And then eventually on my own felt like, oh, none of this is trustworthy. And then considered myself atheist and agnostic and was like, fuck all of that. And then as I started to awaken and really, peer into certain other elements of consciousness and philosophy, and then, spirituality, the Eastern mysticism and everything, that I was like coming back to the Christian stuff and going, oh, there are some interesting truths in this that are really veiled in a lot of metaphor and symbolism. And so it's open for interpretation. And maybe all of these people that I was learning it from are just really interpreting it in a way that I don't resonate with. So there are some truths here. And that's where I think the most hijacking and manipulation and deception can happen, when there's a half truth in it.
Well, yeah, because it like pulls us in, right?
It pulls you in, and there is a part of us that like can discern that there's something real here. But taking it all as truth is always the danger. And I think that's what I've learned early on, that it was like nothing that anyone else is saying, especially kind of organized religions or organized modalities of thought that are everywhere, is the ultimate truth. It takes a lot of discernment of figuring out what is resonant to you and dropping the rest. And I think that's a real difficulty for some people, well, for all of us, in a society that's been conditioned by proof and scientific materialism, is that there needs to be this, we need to seek for something that is valid via facts and proof. And so we're looking for something that is the ultimate truth. And all along the path, we end up finding one person that seems to have it all and go, this is my guy, this is my guru, which right away we're taking the bad route of saying that there's somebody outside of me that knows everything about everything that I need to know. And I need to do whatever I can to listen to this person and apply it to my life, when it's so much more nuanced than that. It's like you individually have to discern your way through it and know that pretty much everything that you're going to be looking at is somebody else's perspective of something, and some of it ain't going to work with you, But I'm just so interested in the actual literal deception of the New Age movement. I mean, how many times I've gone into things and taken them as 100% truth and moved through it, and then later on look back and go, whoa, I bought into that. I really bought into that storyline that the Galactic Federation is going to save us, and I'm from the Pleiades, and I'm a light worker, and, I need to love and light this bitch, and I'll be out, or whatever. And then realizing like it's more complex. And then, multiple times I've gotten to a place where I'm like, I don't trust anything. Like, I can't read any information. I can't. My discernment is all over the map, and I think that's one of the things that seems to be some sort of a protection or a way to discern through things is constant seeking of understanding and knowledge, like understanding the situation, where it's coming from, all the potential distortions that would be leading you to believe something. Like, is there a motive to get you to believe that somebody else is going to benefit from? Like, for instance, you wouldn't have been able to discern through that Fed scam as clearly had you not had the previous knowledge of some of the tricks of the feds and the police and the way that all works. You were able to discern, this isn't how this normally works. I've done this. I wouldn't, have to come down to the local sheriff's department if this was actually who you say you are, the feds.
Right. Like, I'm sure boomers fall for that like a motherfucker.
Because they don't have the experience and knowledge of how some of these things work.
Right.
And that's where, I do think that, and just in the fact, like we were talking about with Christianity, some religions, they villainize thinking. Don't think too much about this. Just take it for what it is and trust. Have faith in it. And that, to me, means that, there's something in the mind. There's something about thinking that is valuable to get through this. And for me as well, I'm going off on all kinds of tangents, but the concept in all kinds of awakening modalities, there is a truth to getting out of your mind and getting into your body and your heart and using those mechanisms as valuable decision-making processing points. It's not, you don't want to all be in your head all the time when you're trying to heal and harmonize the intelligence of our entire vehicle. So there's a lot of helpful aspects of trusting your body's instincts instead of just trusting your mind, because it can kind of get you lost. But I come back time and again that like I have this uncontrollable desire to like always seek new information, knowing that I'm not going to ever finish that. But as I integrate and like sometimes stop the seeking and then just work on being present and working on my sensitivity of my body and my heart and my intuition, that then I kind of want to go back and like learn more. And the more I learn, it is this like the awareness starts to widen and you can see the deception much clearer. Whereas before I was getting pulled into the deception as maybe just a lesson plan of some sort. But it's the more I like open up to just, I want to learn about anything and everything, whatever's piquing my interest, the more I do that, the awareness comes up and then I go, oh my God, like it's so subtle the way this reality is as far as truth and information that can control people to make you believe a certain thing or go a certain way, and not see the real motive within a lot of it. And that's why that's rabbit hole I'm in with the STS, STO, service to self, service to others concept is a really great container to understand just how subtle some of the deception is. Does that all make sense?
Yeah, I'm trying to decide if I want to launch into Yahweh stuff right now, or I think that's probably its own podcast, but it's something that's really interesting to me is what I used to call like the million tiny agendas, that we will sometimes feel like this is obviously very deceptive. Like the New Age movement has a lot of deception in it. And there are some people that call it like the false light or something. And I haven't looked super far into that, but it's the idea that there is like a concentrated conspiracy from like a concentrated agenda to deceive people in the New Age movement. It does seem as if there was at some point a concentrated decision to deceive people with organized religions. However, I think the way that most of these things play out is through a million tiny agendas. And so every human that's involved in the thing is seeking its own personal gain, and it's subconscious, so they don't even know they're doing it. And then that plays out in this like blanketed chaos. So there may be energies above the physical realm, I think, that are benefiting from this. But when I look at like, I don't know that you ever believed you were a Pleiadian starseed, but like the people who believe that, it's because they are very immature in their awakening journey, and they are still playing in the same mythologies as Christianity and
right.
Conspirituality. The reason that people from the new age to back to Christianity pipeline is because they never evolve out of the same mythology. You were Christians the whole time. It just was aliens instead of Jesus, and it's hierarchical. It never stops being hierarchical. If you truly believe that you came here to assist in the humanity's awakening, why do you believe you are above the humans? And it's not that I didn't do that. Like when I died and came back, at which point I very much made a decision. That was the near-death experience, was me making a decision to play a role in that. Whether or not I'm from Sirius or not, who gives a shit? Like that's mythology. That's all like story to make it interesting. But then I felt isolated and I felt alone and I felt outcasted. And it was hard to be in the Matrix for decades and not be seen. And so to make myself feel better, I would call people robots or NPCs or whatever. And that was just about my own feeling isolated and ostracized. And that is why people in the New Age movement talk like that, is because they feel weird, they feel outcasted, and it's the story you tell yourself to feel better. And at some point you mature out of that and you realize that you can't be of assistance to people that you look down on, and you realize your own hierarchical stuff, your own conditioning from capitalism or whatever the last game was in the Matrix. If you mature, and if your spiritual journey is mostly focused on yourself, but then there's so much materialism in spirituality because people don't evolve their mythology. So they're looking for everything outside of themselves. They want the split to happen and the ascension to happen is just repackaged rapture shit.
Revelation
it's all
stuff,
still
yeah.
victim, villain, savior. And then the conspirituality people whose spiritual journey gets so wrapped up in good and evil and stopping the they and the World Economic Forum and whatever. And then they're like Pizzagate people. And then they're like, and I'm not even saying that these things don't exist in the world, but you can see the mythology in the people, and it's in the individuals. It's like, oh, you love the mythology of being a savior, and so you are making your entire awakening about conspiracies and needing to stop the they and the us versus them. You're deeply entrenched in separation consciousness, and you will eventually find your way back to Christianity because it's on the same fucking frequency.
That's the hardest thing to, I feel like, even if we aren't practicing Christians in our earlier lives, like that is a deeply conditioned control mechanism that is within like all of culture, because it's been going for so long,
Right.
that we still find ourselves doing that good guy, bad guy thing in every scenario. And it's so hard to get out of. It's so hard to realize that there's some other paradoxical way of being that like gets you above that because of all these new age traps. It's just, you're like you said, it's like repackaged mythology that is deeply instilled into the culture. And that's where it goes to me, like when I do go all the way back to that, like where did it, for Christianity, like when was the Bible written? Who wrote it? Where did it come from? Can I peer into the motives of the people who wrote it and try to figure out, like, is that a really advanced control mechanism? Again, not to throw the baby out with the bathwater. It's not all controlled opposition, MK Ultra, but I feel like there's a lot of evidence that it primarily is, and it's advanced in the way that it's pulling on the emotions and pulling on real states of ecstasy and saying that ecstasy, that feeling is from this being, so you should worship that being. And then all within that is the division of good and bad. And it's just like, it's everywhere. It's so hard to get out of. But that's what that Yahweh thing, I mean, just thinking of, we don't have to get deeply into the Yahweh stuff, but it,
I want to ask you, can you tell me what you believe? What do you believe Jesus was? What do you believe the God of the First Testament was? And what do you believe they are now?
So, well, I think just to caveat this, what I was going to say before, which kind of informs it, is like, what would be if you have this idea of the devil being bad and Jesus, God, angels being good, the devil's very tricky and cunning, so they say. What would be the most advanced trick for the devil to pull on a group of people? One of them would be to make everyone believe that it is God, it is the good.
Right.
And to worship the good for your savior, to be saved. That, like, we can't throw that idea out that might be occurring, right? So that level of deception can be so good that it can present as the savior figure, and this is what you need to do. You need to do these rituals, follow this belief system, and you will be saved, is a deeply, that's very manipulative, and could that be occurring? And so that's, to me, that's what I started to realize through my seeking and kind of deprogramming of the Christian stuff, that made a lot of sense, that potential, that's what's going on. And so the Yahweh figure is, in a lot of places you can look, I mean, not even just going to the Old Testament, but other areas, other religions and other, descriptions of this figure. It is very odd to have a figure that's known to be all God and all knowing, be so jealous and so vindictive and, kill and control in a way that wouldn't seem to be necessary for an all-knowing God. And that maybe this Yahweh figure is a derivative. It's like, it's not the all-knowing. It's just a very powerful energy that knew how to get people to worship it for its own reality. And that's what I think that figure is. It's a highly deceptive, very advanced, I don't even know. To me, I don't say it's like a being. It's maybe outside of our 3D understanding of like an energy just being one being. It's a collective of it. And so the Jesus thing being something that I can't, like, there's so many interesting theories about is it a real person? Was it a real person, but it really nothing of the story of Jesus is actually accurate. It was somebody else. You know, you can see in so many religions, there's a similar story of this crucified being that was trying to bring love and light. He got crucified, he resurrected. That's everywhere. And is that an archetypal, powerful story that's being told that has something to decipher from it metaphorically that is actually about self-empowerment? I think that's there, but I would say what it has become now in the way the Abrahamic religions have been so instilled in everybody that figure Jesus, the idea of it, is more of a egregor type element that has power to it because we're all subconsciously thinking that and projecting that out. Whether you're Christian or not, like everybody kind of agrees that this Jesus figure was some superhuman and has the ability to heal and is somebody worth giving some kind of authority to. That the idea of everybody collectively doing that builds up an energy that, you know, doesn't necessarily have to adhere to the actual thing that the archetypical story was telling a long time ago. That's just like a possibility of a way of existence. It's now become a very powerful idea. And, you know, I think when we do have experiences that are in some other dimension, whether that's psychedelics, meditation, or anything of this nature, that whatever your consciousness is projecting into it, it's going to be reflected back. And subconsciously, if we have this idea of Jesus being the savior, that's what's going to take the reins a lot of the time and present as that energy. So in a roundabout way, what I'm saying is I think, and I've heard this from other people, and so I'm kind of regurgitating it, but it feels very true to me, is that the Jesus egregor, that idea, is a highly manipulative, powerful demon.
Yeah.
And I just demon in the way, not good and bad, but it's highly deceptive, and there's a different motive around it that involves plugging into your emotional system, your archetypal library of stories and how things should work out, the hero's journey and all of this. And it uses that as a mechanism to pull us away from ourselves and pull us into this idea of being saved by something else, or being special and unique, which then involves you going to enlighten everybody and save everyone, which is just this like self-serving kind of modality. And when you hear people that like, I thought this was a funny thing I heard from someone, that it was like a lot of people can have this idea, but then put into a situation where you're getting psychically attacked, or there's a being in the room, something that's going on that's like paranormal. When you evoke the name of Jesus and say, you know, I rebuke you in the name of Jesus, it oftentimes works. Even if somebody doesn't believe in it, they're not aligned to the Christian myths, it seems to have power no matter what.
Right.
And that's what makes me think it's like, yeah, because it's the most badass demon in the culture.
So funny.
If you're being attacked by something that is negative and trying to, you know, take something from you, take loose or whatever, then you evoke Jesus. It goes, oh, fuck, that's the guy that's like way up top and I'm in subservient to him. Like, I can't fuck with that. Okay, you're pulling him in here, I'll get out, you know? And so it's like, that's so fascinating to me. Like, oh yeah, that makes some sense.
Yeah.
I think a lot of this is just predicated on the power of belief. Like if we have a belief that is super subconscious that Jesus is this all-knowing kind of figure, that's going to show up. It can be taken advantage of in so many ways. And I just find it extremely fascinating that all of these religions are potentially modalities of very advanced deception and manipulation that we, in a lot of senses, are like choosing to believe and choosing to experience that duality of these things, that the good and bad. And if you're open-minded and not like rigid at adhering to that, then I don't think you have more possibility of learning the deception tactics of potential energies that are doing this. And that's what I'm saying in a way, like knowledge does protect. Ignorance is dangerous. And in whatever way you want to say it, and we're all always growing. We can't know everything, but if we're open-minded and never grabbing a certain modality of spiritual belief or how the world should be and trying to fit everything that we experience into that one thing and say, like, this is my core belief of how it works. If you're not doing that, like, you can be really open to learning the real subtlety of it. Every time we get into a situation where we like have a new profound experience and learn some Eastern philosophy and go, oh, this is it, because it's in contrast to Christianity. Buddhism has a lot more to offer than Christianity, but I'm not going to just put all my cards down and say, like, that's what I believe. Even the word belief has this kind of limitation to it, So I think it's helpful to at certain junctures, you've opened up your belief and you now have new information that you want to like sit with and say, okay, well, I'm going to put my flag in this for now because it's helping me get through the rest of this programming. But eventually you're going to have to take that flag out and go, okay, but now I have to open up with this too. This isn't the ultimate truth. This is limiting me from like the idea of Buddhism being the Maya, desire is suffering, so like Maya is an illusion. That can be helpful for certain deprogramming from certain elements in our lives and the beliefs we've had. But at some point, like if you adhere to that too long, you don't engage in the world. You reject all materialism and you reject all desire, and you become a passive being that might experience other levels of existence and bliss, but you're in a physical body. Do something with your body. Move into the world and learn in a different in a way that's like tactile and experience based, which is so valuable. The Buddhism thing has a dead end at some point, and you have to I have had to learn how to just open up again. Once it's like I've played it out and learned all I can, I now have to go, okay, well, might be something that's actually contradicting this way of belief that has more to offer in a seeking knowledge that is constantly liberating me.
So like dogma and capital T truth are the hole in the aura that make interacting with any of these ideas dangerous.
Yeah.
Like I think we can, every single iteration of what Jesus is exists. I think he was a dude. I think, who's the guy with the Greek that interpreted the Greek?
Amon Hillman.
Amon Hillman, who's making the rounds right now, who is translating from the ancient Greek version of the Bible and says Jesus was actually just blasted on psychedelics and doing some questionable things with young boys. A lot of that resonates just with questions I had about the Bible. And I love this as an idea that Jesus was just blasted on drugs. And so he was tapped into some shit. Because I asked the aliens, I was obsessed with Christianity when I first woke up. And I asked the aliens and they were like, yeah, it was just someone who was awake, who was trying to explain awake stuff to people who are asleep. And they can only hear through their own mythology. And so he's like, you're a god. And they're like, you're a god, got it. And he's like, no, it's the I am. And they're like, you are, got it. And then he's like, no, that's like, that's supposed to be an opening bit for AOT, but I've never made it work. And that it was just a misunderstanding. And this is the analogy I always use for it. But in Men in Black 2, where he leaves a business card in a locker with a bunch of tiny fuzzy cutie aliens. And when he comes back, they're worshiping the business card. Yeah. And it's like a business card for like a mechanic shop or something. And they're like, the mechanic shop. And that's literally how I see Christianity now, is that someone came into the realm, which by the way was at the beginning of the age of Pisces, I believe. And so he's represented as the fish. And the age of Pisces is all about like a great illusion where everyone's just kind of trapped in this illusion. And Aquarius, the water bearer, is like the truth comes in. And so I think anytime, it kind of goes back to that witch wound, like anytime someone wakes up in the big dream, they risk getting murdered because the paranoia. And I can say, as someone who was like awake when the Matrix was much more dense than it is now, people get very fucking weird. That's why I started being pretty hidden about it. And most people didn't know that about me, because if you kind of wake them up a little bit, if you accidentally initiate them, which will happen if you're being honest, then when you're not around them, they will go back to sleep, and then they start to get really kind of paranoid about you. And so that totally resonates, that Jesus was just blasted out on drugs, maybe psychedelics, and sharing a bunch of stuff, and then was able to do magic because he was really awake. And you are able to do that. Like, humans are capable of all those things. It's the limitation that stops us. But then you're doing that stuff in front of dum-dums. I don't mean that as a insult, but you're doing that in front of deeply unconscious people who are still deeply programmed by matrix, like density beliefs. So like punishment, good, evil, whatever. And so it didn't work out well for him, obviously. And then now there's an egregor, meaning just like a concentrated thought form, because all of these people who want to give their power to something are giving their power to this thing that's not there. So I think the man existed. I don't think he's even remotely connected to the energy of Jesus that people are giving their power to. And then I also don't know, because you have all these new agers talking to Jesus, I think they're talking to someone else. Like, it has become it's become its own thing, that disempowered people, which disempowered people are going to disempower, like they don't know how to be in their own power or how to engage with something like the Bible. Like, I can get messages from the Bible. I still have like Bible scriptures in my head that work in consciousness stuff, but I'm engaging with it now from an empowered standpoint. If you're looking for something to worship, it's either going to be Jesus or it's going to be Taylor Swift. Like, you're going to find the government, you're fucking, creaming your pants over a political figure. It's because you're in a disempowered state and you're looking for something to worship and something to give your power to. And then any embodied or disembodied energy that wants to capitalize has a place to capitalize, right? So it goes back to that like Orion service to self, fourth density thing. It's like, if you are a parasitic energy, where do they hang out? They hang out at concerts. They hang out at churches. Why? Because you literally have people listening to music, which opens your energy field, lifting their arms in the air, and just holes in their aura, and just yes, please, I want to give all of my power to you, Taylor or Yahweh or whatever the fuck. Disempowered people crave to be fed on. It's like in True Blood. You had vampires, but then you also had people that it was like a kink of theirs to get fed off of. And that's literally all there is. And then those people barely start to wake up, and they move into the New Age movement, and they bring all that dogmatic thinking. They bring all that hierarchical thinking. I was talking to someone the other day. I've been tiptoeing around people's hierarchical thinking for so long, and now I'm like, no, you're just going to take responsibility. I'm not speaking hierarchically. If you still have hierarchical programming, you need to work through that. We are all a part of the same thing from different perspectives. If you still think the fact that you're awake makes you better than people who are asleep, that's your shit. I don't know. It's normal. Early awakening belief systems. And there are like obviously things I don't agree with, and I engage with them, and then I observe my own judgment and go like, oh, what insecurity is leading me to be judgmental, whatever. But that's like my responsibility. It's not someone else's responsibility. Anyway, I have to pee really bad, and then I want to get an energy drink.
Yeah, well, one thing that when you were talking about earlier, that thing where people are worshiping the Taylor Swifts or worshiping, getting into like going into a concert and having this like ecstatic state. You know, I would even say in church when you're having like a worship ceremony and the music is like a frequency that opens this emotional state, and you open up and have a experience of ecstasy that most people equate with, that's the Holy Ghost. That's the Spirit coming through you, and you are, in conference with this energy, and like this is what we're doing is we're worshiping that energy. I remember when I was in church, and I got into the church via doing music. My parents were not religious. I got invited to be in the worship band because the worship band were all high schoolers that were graduating, and I was in middle school, and my friend had been, going to the church since he was young. He was a guitar player and was like, hey, they need a new worship band. And I was like, hell yeah. I don't know about this church stuff, but like we get to be in a rock and roll band on stage. It's a huge church. So the youth group was like 300 to 600 people once a week. And that's why I was into it. And the experience that you'd have like playing for that many people, and playing music that's emotional, it's meant to be activating in some kind of opening our emotional state. I would get into these trances, essentially, like when you're playing that music, and ecstasy experiences of just gratitude and bliss and like harmony. And I always equated to that, like, wow, this is powerful. Like Jesus is in the room. There's an energy here, and then, blast forward to 10 years later where I'm doing music, not in a religious state, obviously, like in my band, and playing to huge audiences and having the same phenomena occur. But I had, since then very much denounced any kind of religious belief. And the only thing that I realized that I was going into the same state of trance and ecstasy and just feeling all of that I realized was like, oh, what they were calling Jesus is actually just like a natural phenomena of the human being going into an open, enlightened state that's like heightened. And that is natural in a lot of senses. It's not specifically Christianity or Jesus. And
right.
So you then realize that there's so much art to the way preachers do their thing. It's like the words that they're saying are obviously sometimes an effective use of getting somebody into a certain state, but like there's a pattern that they know how to really like bring up the room and excitement. And for some preachers, if you listen to them, there's a cadence to how they build up their speaking. It's getting it's quicker, and it's getting excited, and like especially the like Pentecostal churches and stuff there's like a real art to it. And when you bring someone into that state of ecstasy, you can make them believe a lot of things. It's like you're open and vulnerable. As you'd say, it's almost like a hole in your aura. I don't think it's necessarily a hole. Like if I'm having that state when I was on stage for Foster the People, it's not like it's a negative thing, but being aware that there's a lot that can happen in that state that can make you believe a certain thing because you're in that heightened state. It has more weight to it, whatever thing that you're going to say during that period, or even pointing to what that ecstasy is. It's Jesus. It's more than just like reading from a book and telling you. It actually is like amplifying it. And so I had that realization in the band, and it kind of validated my leaving from the church. I was like, oh, that's just like, it was like hijacked. It actually wasn't Jesus. Because that was the one thing, like when I was leaving the church, I was like, but what were all those experiences that I had during, services where I really felt something in the room. I felt like there was a presence and that it was loving. And in the band, I was like, oh, it's just me. It's just, and I'm definitely in a heightened state, but I'm now able to like see that that's not some woo-woo magic. It's a natural phenomena that is easily can be taken advantage of. And so it also brought me to be thinking about this. I don't know what you said that made me think of it, but see if I can unpack this. I think it's interesting when you can convince someone to use their free will to make a decision to be in service to someone. So like if something can manipulate you to, with your free will, make a decision to disempower itself and give energy to the other being, that is the most powerful thing sought after from any kind of distorted service to self being that is trying to take someone's loosh, take someone's energy. A lot of people, I think, have like asked the question why, if there are these controllers in power that are all knowing and they can, travel time and change things, and why don't they just build a real slave system of beings and put them in vats and just like siphon their energy? And I think what's interesting is that if a being is not making the decision to be enslaved, though it's covert and they don't think they're doing that, but if they're not making that free will decision and they are forced to do it, that there might be something that degrades that level of loosh or consciousness that certain beings that are just relying on taking from others, it degrades it. It's not as well of a cooked meal. It's like it's burnt. It's if you're forcing them into doing something overtly and they're not making the free will decision, they're coming in there with like a crushed consciousness.
Well, they'll power down. If you have the beings in the aquarium, the majority of the energy is coming through emotional energy. If you just lock people in a cage and they know that they're in a cage, they're going to depress, and there's not energy to have.
There's no food, right? And so it's so fascinating, because if you can get them to think and like make the free will choice to be imprisoned in that system, but they think it isn't, they're activated and they're lit up. They're just going in a dead end direction that's just food for this thing. But that I started to realize why there is this. That's why it's not just so overt like slave. We're not all just living in chains in a thing where they're like the Matrix, where we're in those little pods. Though that maybe that exists on some level, but like you can see why they would deceive and get you to make a choice that you believe is good for you. So you bring in the energy and you bring in that consciousness that's what they're taking. That for me cracked so much of like, oh, that's why the deception is so subtle and there's such an art to it, to get, because at the end of the day, this like free will idea is like one of the laws of everything. It's like you can make your own decision, and you could then argue that whatever we're experiencing in this reality that is disempowering and making us feel pain and depression is because we are choosing something that is deceptive, that it's taking from us. You have the free will to choose not to do it. But seeing the deception is a huge aspect of that. These choices I'm making every day, what part of it am I actually giving up my autonomy and my authority to something that's promising to save me? Like that's where the energy is being harvested.
Yeah, the loop of Yahweh, the God of the Old Testament, being like, well, you have free will. And that's because free will is a universal law, and they have to tell you the truth and get your consent. So it's all written in there kind of crooked, right? So you have free will. However, here's a list of things I don't want you to do. And so they are bad. And that was something that used to drive me nuts in Christianity. It's like, what's the fucking point of free will if you're going to be in trouble or punished for doing the thing you used your free will for? Like the point of free will is so that you can explore reality in whatever direction your soul wants to experience it. And it's actually the most liberating universal law.
When you realize you have a choice and everything.
Yeah, is like you have a choice, and then you're going to experience the natural consequences of those choices. If you choose to harm someone else, reality is a reflective mechanism, so you will get a reflection of that, not because you're bad, but because that's what you put out. But you can get gnarly reflections back just by putting out judgment, just by cheering when your perceived enemy suffers. You will then suffer, not because you're being punished by some sky daddy, but because it's a reflection of your internal experience. But this religion then harvests energy through guilt and shame. And so it's like, you have a free will to do whatever you want. However, these are the things that I'm okay with. So if you go outside of this, then I'm going to punish you, or you're going to go to hell, or you are bad, whatever. And it does make a lot of sense to me that in the Old Testament, and the aliens kind of alluded to this as well, that in the Old Testament, humans just weren't that evolved in their consciousness. And any being that was further along, or it could be time travelers, that works as well, could just be giving them information and they were like, whoa,
Yeah, that rings so true to me. It's like when you, and I do think it's some kind of time travel idea, but that you would, if you pop into the Amazon right now to a tribe that has like never, for generations has not been outside of the jungle and not seen any kind of technological developments that we have, if you walk in there and show them an iPhone and are able to take a photo of them with a flash in the night and do that and then show it to them on the phone, that it does not fit into their paradigm of what's possible. And so the best thing that they can do is whatever their certain belief is, as whatever, if nature is the God, if there's something outside of them that's more powerful than them, they're going to say, that's what this is. And then around that, there's so much that you control that tribe because you are that God. Anything you say goes. It doesn't even have to really make logical sense, because the feat that you just did was magic to them. It didn't make logical sense, but they saw it, and the only box they can put that in is some all-powerful God. That's just so crazy. I mean, you could power over anybody by doing that, because like to you, what you're doing, like for us, it's like the iPhone is normal. It's just a thing. We understand it. It's not magic, but to them, it doesn't fit in there. So it blows their paradigm open. And when you've done that, you've created an ecstasy state. You've created all these like biological things that are just open for programming. And that's what I think, there's many levels of being able to do that, as far as like how long that will stick, how long you can get away with that. And that's what I think, like the Abrahamic religions, it was an extremely tactful way that was programmed and threaded into a group of people at the time that were in a different paradigm of thought those things didn't fit in, and they came in, at different points, created these magical moments, but then added to it like a really subtle narrative of ways that you should believe and what you should do to be able to do these feats of magic in a way that's like so crafty. And so it's like a piece of art doing that, like to be able to make it last for 3,000 years or whatever it is that it's been, that it seeds in and it infects every element of modern conscious thought is from that programming.
Right. And I don't know about uncontacted tribes in 2024. Sometimes I feel like they're probably holding the vibration of the planet and they're already living in 8D. But back when the Old Testament was written, we were like in a dissension, like deep, thick into a dissension. So very disconnected
And that's where
from.
you would go. Like if you had a time travel, you'd go to those moments that were deep, deep down and very ignorant.
Right.
To, pop off one of these narratives that then it's a control mechanism for a long period of time. You can get a lot done in there as far as if you're just trying to eat consciousness and eat energy. Like that's great. That's a spot you would want to go, right?
Yeah. So I do, when it comes to like Christianity or Catholicism, I do think that there has been several moments of like hand-wringing conspiracy, which I don't really believe in most circumstances. In most circumstances, I believe that people are operating out of their subconscious, a million tiny agendas turns into whatever, or it's like, everyone's not in a room conspiring for late stage capitalism. They're all just pursuing their own agendas and it's kind of working out that way. However, I do feel like when it comes specifically to like Catholicism and Christianity, and I'm not a history buff, but I know there have been like obviously massive colonization efforts with Christianity, kind of forcing people into this religion and away from their native religions that were actually connected to the earth and magic and everything else. So there have been like now were the people who were doing those crusades just high on Salem witch trial paranoia? Possibly. But there have definitely been concerted efforts to take put certain books together for the Bible, use it for certain things, backdoor deals, whatever. So when it comes to religion, and I'm just going to speak to that, like Abrahamic religions of like Christianity, Catholicism, like the Bible, I do believe that it's been a combination of people operating out of their subconscious and disempowerment all the way down to your modern day Christian running back to Jesus because they think the book of Revelations is playing out. But then I think there has also been people who were into esotericism way back in the day, writing the book of Revelations, knowing that this stuff was coming because of the shift and energies being involved in that to benefit from that. I mean, it's just this thing where so many different energies and beings and physical people have had something to benefit from this.
Right.
That it is an amalgamation of all of that. However, it has zero impact on you if you don't choose to be disempowered and be seeking something outside of yourself. Like they created a place for the disempowered to put their power, but the disempowered were going to find a place to put their power anyway. When it comes to the New Age movement, I cannot tell. I go through phases where I feel guilty for constantly shitting on the New Age movement. And then I go through phases where I'm like, no, it's very important that someone shits on the New Age movement because it's easy to throw the baby out with the bathwater of like you get burned by the New Age movement. And so then you stop your own personal consciousness journey and you run back to Christianity. I mean, there's been this mass exodus back to Christianity when I just want to be like, babe, it's because you never left Christianity. Like you didn't focus on yourself. Your consciousness journey is about finding yourself. This stuff is fun to talk about. It's fun to get into. It's fun to use as mirrors. But the fact that there are people conspiring or energies harvesting energy from Christianity is fun to talk about and observe in reality, but it doesn't have an impact on me because I'm in my power. But if you go into your consciousness journey feeling like you need to save the world from the they, like the they are always going to exist. You're the they in other people's stories. You're going to have to run back because you need a savior, because you do eventually have to face your relationship with good and evil, or you hit a ceiling and you can't go any further. You don't have to do anything, I guess. But like in this process, it involves becoming self-aware is what it is. Remembering what you are, remembering what this is. I like remembering better than awakening even. Mm-hmm. And the mythology changes with the frequency. And as your frequency goes up, which is not a hierarchical thing, But your frequency goes up, you start to experience new mythologies. And if you're not willing to surrender the old mythology of victim, villain, savior, externalized reality, externalized, projections of your own shadow, then you get kind of trapped in a loop. If you don't do nervous system work, you're coming into all this stuff with trauma responses, If you don't get to know your own subconscious bullshit, then you're just going to keep having the same kind of experiences, whatever. You keep trying to get into community without having done work on yourself with other people who haven't done work on themselves. Like, yeah, it's the same. You're going to get a guru who's going to turn to a cult leader. He's going to fuck everybody in the group. And then there's going to be a bunch of shady stuff and they're going to take your money and they're going to start a multi-level marketing. Like, yeah, that stuff's going to keep playing out because that is the reflection of the internal experience. You don't decide that you're into aliens now instead of Jesus and suddenly you're a good person.
Right.
I don't even like good, bad person narrative, but like suddenly you're healed and everything's going to be great. And we saw this like when people tried to get together in the soberish days and immediately started projecting on each other. And then they're like, I thought this was going to be different. Why did you think you were going to be different? Because you now think you're better than everyone because you're spiritual. Why would it be different? Why would we have a different interaction with each other than we are having with the world out there, other than like we kind of understand each other more, but then we don't understand each other more because we're not done playing in that mythology. So I can't tell if there are some people who believe like the New Age movement is deceptive false light to drive people away, whatever. And I'm like, I don't know. It just feels like a million tiny agendas of, like, especially now that you have the internet, like way too many people making content, but it's like also fine. I don't know. Cause it's also like, yeah, you're just expressing what your frequency is capable of. Thank fuck I couldn't post on the internet in my first 5-10 years of awakening, but it just is. Changing your mythology takes years, right? That evolution takes years of going at things with dogma and then realizing, oh, it's a little bit of this, it's a little bit of this. Like when you're talking about seeking, you're talking about like constantly expanding your worldview.
Yeah, which involves never landing on this is the way and everybody needs to conform to this way. It never is that at any moment. It's always expanding and opening up. And I think that's what, like all the stuff you're saying, it's kind of what really does make this idea of like cults in the like really broad term, not like your, Jonestown Massacre cult, like the obvious ones, but like cult mentality in general is about this hierarchical structure. There's one person at the top that knows everything, fall in line, sacrifice certain parts of your being in your life for that, is rampant everywhere. I mean, when you really think about the term cult, I don't think anybody agrees on the definition, but everything that has some kind of structure to it that is there's like a daddy at the top, I think falls into the idea of what a cult is. So there's, you could look at the government as a cult, the religions as a cult, and not trying to like villainize all of that and use that term weightedly, like everything is a cult. But the idea of it being this dogmatic kind of belief system that has a dead end to it. And that's the only part of like the new age thing that I think it's this and that, like you a lot of times say, it is a deception tactic. I wouldn't say it's like false light that just makes you want to go like completely throw it all out. But so many of the new age modalities and ways of belief present themselves as not cultic and not hierarchical, but they innately are. Like when you really fundamentally understand what's occurring and look at it from an open mind view, there's many different new little cults in there, and they're so deceptive to me because there's a lot of like truth in it as far as people saying the right words and pointing towards the right thing. We're all one and everything is love. We have to come together and, be in ecstasy and love. And, you bring a lot of people that are really unhealed and not deprogrammed from this good and bad kind of thing, that like, that's why it's so messy, like people jumping from a reality that is very much distorted in its like sexual beliefs. If you go into like get pulled into one of these new age spiritual things where it's kind of centered around, sexuality being free and being open and we can connect and all is love, not having really like unpacked the depths of the darkness of deception you've been in previously.
Yeah.
Then boom, we have like a new place to like play out your dark sexuality that has been suppressed for so long, but you're letting it all come out and saying it's all good and love and like I'm just open, and that's when you get these like real crazy, subtle sexual abuse things that are going on in this group of people that seem to on all other levels be saying the right things and saying love and all is one, and that we have another like cult building up. And I think that's the part of the new age thing that I do think is somewhat, you can hijack that. Like if there is some other energies, and I agree with what you're saying. It's not like there's just people that know what they're doing consciously and that enact this deception. Maybe at the top that it's some being that's actually not physical that is like doing that, but you can't even, it's hard to relate to that perception because it's outside of time. It's outside of our paradigm. So you can't even really worry about that. The thing that it's being able to take action in the physical world is because it's using people's subconscious. So if you have not healed and you have not known yourself, you're open to programming and being manipulated. So you're just kind of a puppet. Even at these levels of spiritual new age development that people get a lot of things, they're not subservient to the government. They're not subservient to a lot of authority, but they jumped from a real dualistic reality, jumped into just all love and light. It's like you're completely off balance in a way that you're extremely manipulative. You're open to manipulation through your subconscious. And that's what I think is the primary part of all of this. Even the old religions is like, one being that was like a higher dimensional being came into physicality and did one or two things and set the like frequency and then got out and then just uses any kind of open portal of a person that's basically ignorant. It's not even like enlightened in a higher dimension. They're just ignorant to certain knowledge. And so then you can manipulate and control that person and over time just create this kind of wild labyrinth of deception using just the subconscious of people. And so that again, it's like back to this no dogma, no strict rules on anything, taking certain elements of dogma and rules as a guidepost at certain junctures, and then keeping an extreme open mind through that adjusts you out of it is like the way to go, and be constantly focused on your own discernment and growing like inside as an individual, getting your subconscious up out of the depths and into a more conscious state is the thing that is protection. You can be sure that you're not being used as a pawn to like play these things out. And at the end of the day, it actually is all experience. So it's like, it's all lessons. I think it's like, it just is. It's not something to whine about and like try to get rid of, but the knowledge of it allows you to not get pulled into the dead ends. For me, I keep saying you need to, but it's like, this is just my learning of it and my experience. But,
yeah, I feel like when we're talking about you, it's just like the proverbial you,
yeah. I just hate the way sometimes I hear myself talking and I'm like, now I'm preaching and telling everybody what to do. It's hard to not get into that state of mind and how to communicate. But Yeah, it's wild to see how many people are like rejecting, like going into the new age and going into like a good amount of growth and widening their awareness. And then at a certain point, that slingshot, like, because they haven't dropped the older mythologies, get like just yanked back into a this and that or this or that like set of framework, because you can't, it's like you get burnt out trying to keep that mythology into some of these paradoxical thinkings. Your consciousness starts to like really resist. You get a psychosis experience and it fucking freaks you out because it actually amplifies your dualistic thinking. And you see the devil himself and go, oh shit, I've gone too far. I've got to go back to Jesus. It like makes sense when you think about it. And that's just the naive aspect of like of all of us at certain parts not being able to integrate this like autonomous function.
Well, a big part of this process, and I think the internet creates this illusion that it's supposed to go very fast. And when you first wake up, you feel like you know everything because you know so much more than you knew the day before, right? And then you feel like your awareness is already so expanded. And what I've learned over almost 25 years now of being conscious is that still to this day, new categories of reason are being added. And so that means like there's a file cabinet. And before you start to expand, your file cabinet has a good file and a bad file. And every single fucking thing you experience goes into the good box or the bad box. Like that's the extent of the judgment that you're capable of. And then over time, more and more files get added. And after a while, those files start to become paradoxes. They start to directly contradict each other, and experiences go into two contradictory files at the same time. What happens to a lot of people I see is that they are not adding those new categories of reason, and they're still sticking things in the good box or the bad box. And they then start to explode. And it's not just like they run back to Christianity. It's like healing goes from being something that's naturally happening to an addiction that people have, like a pathologizing of themselves, or the amount of sessions I do with people who are afraid they're not living their purpose. And it's like, you still have the belief that you're doing something wrong. Like you still, like that is still subtly a good or bad thing. And a lot of people are like, I don't know what my purpose is. Like, frantic, and I've never in my fucking life thought about what my purpose is.
Yeah.
I assume my purpose is whatever I'm doing. When I was doing meth and shitting away my 20s, I mean, from the outside, apparently shitting away my 20s on drugs, I was into it. I was like, this is my purpose, is to explore reality outside of the confines of the rat race, And then when I got clean, I spent years just catching up to living in society. And I wasn't like, oh God, I'm not fulfilling my purpose. I just assume whatever the fuck I'm doing is my purpose because I'm a soul here experiencing things. And even in stretches of time where I was just in the suburbs, homeschooling and, making gluten-free meals taste like fast food or what, trying to master that. I'm like, I guess this is the thing I'm trying to figure out, And obviously now at this point in my life, which didn't start until my 40s, I am living out a purposeful thing. I'm talking about things that I'm very passionate about and my work feels very fulfilling, but I couldn't have done that without spending 20 years in the Matrix, because everything I talk about is my personal experience. And so I was gathering data for all that time. I'm not really ever worried that I'm not doing the thing. It's like, that's when capitalism meets consciousness. And then you get this thing where everybody quit their fucking jobs to become tarot readers because of a judgment in your head telling you that that's more purposeful. where you can just find purpose in everything you're doing. I don't feel more spiritual now in this job than I felt waiting tables, because when I was waiting tables, I was using it to hack abundance. I literally learned abundance through trial and error with every single table I went to for years. For years. That's where I learned how that energy worked. I learned how that energy worked through racking up credit cards and then manifesting ways to get it, like through real life, regular experience is where I learned these things. But the spiritual movement will have you, the New Age movement, which mostly comes from coming into this thing with your old programming and looking at things through the limiting perspectives, and then also community. Everyone's so fucking obsessed with like having a consensus community, but all that does is like entrench you in some of these programs, because now you've got a group of people in their dogma and everybody just can't wait to get into community. And the reality is that consciousness is a very intimate, personal journey. And the consensus reality was a thing that we did in our unconsciousness. And that does not mean you have to be alone. That's like the first thing that people hear. But it's a very personal, intimate, internal thing. And so much of this stuff happens because people are so desperate to be in community that they end up joining cults.
It's like community's too early. Like we're all still unhealed. Like let's all get together and project on each other and make it, I guess it quickens the aspect of getting that
it's
shit
an
out,
option, but
it doesn't, I think the idea that these communities are the first step once you've awakened to get into that's always, and I was on that tip, early on too. And we got shoved off of it because of trying it with just small groups of people and realizing like, oh, we're not all at the same level of healing right now. And this idea of community maybe is something that needs to more naturally happen. Like we will find ourselves as we heal around people that are at same frequency levels, where then, and I like to even think of it now as like community. It's just more networking. Like I like finding it's natural to find a network of people when you start to just figure out yourself and then have boundaries around people that are like, you're not at the same frequency with, not being better or worse. It's just like, this doesn't work. I'm not going to engage in that anymore. And you find yourself then having like, oh, well, I have these like 3 or 4 people around me that it's pretty natural. Like I'm not having to force anything. There's no rules to follow. There's no dissonance between our way we see things. And that's how I think the community idea will unfold as we move forward. I do think we're more powerful in numbers, and the way you can get reflections for yourself by connecting with someone else and hearing their perspective with an open mind, it adds to your self-knowing. And so it's like this reflective element that I think is very powerful, but it can't be forced. And I think that's one element, is the desire for us all to kind of, we wake up right away and then go, oh, I need to get with everybody that thinks the same way, when we just begin the process of healing and deconditioning a lot of that stuff. That deconditioning is wild to me. It's never, I thought I was done at many junctures of it, and then I just keep discovering more and more habits of thought that are actually disempowering and not something of value to me, that are subtly occurring. Like I don't even realize it until I can catch it, because something's annoying me in my reality. I'm frustrated. And then I realize, oh, I've been making this happen because of this conditioned thinking that there's some kind of binary that I need to traverse and get over, How do you think?
I do want to, don't lose that question. Although I haven't been like, what's my purpose? I don't want to make this sound like I haven't dealt with all this stuff, because I have dealt with all this stuff. When I first woke up, I thought I was like Jesus for a while, and then I thought I was the devil. I thought I was something very important. I don't know how common that is now with people waking up, because there are so many other people awake, but I couldn't find anyone else who was awake. So I thought that I was something, like I was single-handedly going to change whatever. It's very hard not to have delusions of grandeur when you've got like aliens training you for some sort of like moment.
I think it's like an initiatory process. We all go through it. Like,
right. I did think I was supposed to wake everyone up. And so
Yeah.
I absolutely was evangelical. Like
Totally.
the reason I know not to be evangelical is because I experienced it. I initiated people who are not ready to be initiated. I could not understand timelines until 2017, until I actually like physically saw myself shift from one to another. A lot of the things that the aliens said to me 25 years ago, I'm just now starting to understand because I didn't have enough categories of reason to understand. Like I hadn't healed my trauma enough to understand what feminine energy was because I wasn't safe enough to do that. I wasn't in my body until the last 2 years, until I did nervous system work. So this is where I am. I have a hard time with concepts like spiritual bypassing or just shitting on the New Age movement because they have to have a point of entry, even like manifesting girl boss shit. It's like really materially focused. I first of all don't resonate with the moralizing of materialism.
Yeah.
It just is. It
Yeah,
just
yeah.
was, and people are still there. And you're not a better person because you're not materialistic. But some people go from like hardcore capitalist, which is also fine because it's the reality we're playing. You're not a better person because you're not a capitalist. Into manifestation, but that's their entry point, and then that gives them the opportunity to go through the other process. You can only enter through whatever frequency you're on. Some people enter through conspiracies and then find themselves whatever. So I have a hard time. That's the part that makes me feel bad about shitting on the New Age movement. And then when people talk about spiritual bypassing, it's like, sometimes hard stuff is hard and people don't have the emotional capacity. They literally don't have access to their emotional body. So they just skip to like toxically positive. But if you really read the energy of someone who's toxically positive and needs everything to be good vibes, whatever, you can tell that they're terrified of their emotional body.
Right.
And that's not a choice that someone makes who has access to their emotional body. Like someone who can face their shadows is not going to opt to spiritually bypass. Spiritually bypassing is people doing what their capacity is to do it. And so a lot of the criticisms of the New Age movement, when it comes down to the individuals, I'm always torn on because I'm like, those people are doing what they're capable of doing.
Yeah.
Like I definitely was wildly dissociated. I have like a survivor personality, and I have a survivor personality, meaning I will just dissociate and survive the experience. You don't see me like getting really trapped in the unfairness of it all. But that's just like literally because I was traumatized so much as a kid. Today we were looking at some turkeys outside. And I was like, oh, so they're running. And I was like, oh, that's so cute. And I remember thinking that people like you, like your generation, was really into animals and thought they were cute. And for decades of my life, I thought you guys were just like being full of shit or being immature or something. I really couldn't understand like what your guys' fucking obsession with animals and nature was. This trauma. I was fucking traumatized. I was dissociated outside of my body. I was floating above my body my entire life because my body had experienced a lot of trauma. And so I just wasn't capable of feeling my feelings or enjoying nature or even fucking noticing trees around me because I had to heal all of that. And now I get to enjoy those things because I have faced that stuff, but it took me a long time to face it.
Yeah.
And so that's where I'm torn, is like, I want to talk shit about the constructs of the New Age movement, but I don't really resonate with the criticisms
Of the individuals,
because it's like that is a frequency that exists, and it is a gateway for many people.
Yeah.
Many people never take the gateway, and there's creeps and predators and every other thing in there, and those constructs support it, but those constructs are held up by people coming into spirituality from a materialist standpoint. But you're going to be materialist until you're not. And so, yeah, I don't know. It's such a circle
agree.
for me.
I'm not like, and that's just so we're clear.
And I'm talking about me because I was like, I don't worry about my purpose.
But I'm glad you brought it up because there is like, it's so easy to just focus on these like negative parts. But I think it's a great point that you make that these are all entry points into something more evolving and paradoxical. And it's hard. It's hard to get there via the state that we have been like programmed into. And so everybody has to come at it from a different way. And those ways are, to me, it's like an initiatory process as far as like, here's your first hurdle. Can you get out of bringing your mythology binary thinking into this new modality? Go, here's the test, and then you have to move through that. And all along that way, that's messy because everybody, once they get into that new system, they want to just scream from the rooftops, I found it. Here's the system. It's, Buddhism, or it's whatever the thing is. And so I agree that it's not the individuals that I enjoy poking at. I'm amazed at learning more and more how deceptive it all is and
right.
how tricky that is to navigate. And there's a purpose for that. And it's beautiful. And there's like this growth that happens when we really open up and move through each state, not trying to constantly be like, I'm doing tarot and hearing something like this and going, I shouldn't do it. It is the devil. It's deception. You have to figure it out for ourselves. And that's what I've been doing the whole time. But the more I move through some of those things, I look back and I'm like, man, wow, it is really convincing the way that this deception occurs in the New Age. And I think that's what I'm mostly pointing to, and not even in a way that's villainizing it. It's just going, damn, like it's kind of in an awe of beauty of how tactful some of this, the way we experience life and the way it pulls on our emotions to seek to get out of whatever the struggle we're in, that there's little traps all along the way that are so convincing, and that there's like this yummy food in it that you're like, oh yeah, this is it. And then you realize like, oh no, it's like fishing. I'm like, I got baited and like I got hooked and now I'm getting yanked up out of the system again. How do I figure out how to not take that bait? Like recognize that it's just bait.
Yeah. And I don't know how much of it is that the matrix loads according to our beliefs and like our consciousness,
I think that's a huge
right?
element of it.
And so how much of the deception is not, that's the thing, is I think there's a new category of reason for what we experience as deception that is actually just egregores or like pockets of reality loading because of the belief system we bring into it. Like I took things so literally because I came from this or that dogmatic, dualistic reality that when I was in maybe my first year of awakening, magazines would talk to me. Like magazines were still a big thing, and I would get Wired magazines and make like collage art or whatever. But even before I started making the collage art, the headlines would talk to me, and I was like learning, like the aliens were teaching me through the headlines. And they were trying to teach me about abundance, but I was so deeply entrenched in poverty, like so poverty mentality, so fucking programmed into poverty mentality that enough money to buy a meal felt inconceivable to me. I was so deeply entrenched in poverty mentality and scarcity. And so there was a series of songs and headlines and things telling me that money is free. Money is free. It's free. It's free. So embarrassing. And so I took that message literally. And I remember telling everybody like, oh, literally money is free. You can just have it. Like that's what the messages were saying. Money is free. You can just have it. Now, where I live now in my life, I'm like, oh yes, it is. But when I say that to people who have the same scarcity mentality, you're going to have to go on a whole journey to get to the place where you understand what I'm saying. Yeah. Please take my abundance course that you can get for free to do that work. But it took me a decade plus of rifling through the brambles of my own scarcity to understand what this meant. But anyway, in 2001, I was calling the corporations for whom these advertisements, that's what it was. They were like advertisements saying stuff like that. I was calling these companies and being like, I would like the money. I swear to God.
That's
I
amazing.
did this for weeks. And they're like, what? And I'm like, I'm calling, I know about the money. I would like the money.
You're like, I got the message. I know it. I hacked it. Just can you give me the free money?
High as balls. And these are just like B2B tech companies from back in
That's
the early
so
2000s.
good.
And so then they're like, I don't know what you're talking about, ma'am. And so I'm like, okay, there's a code. There's a code to it. Like I was taking it as literally these companies, it's all, because then I also had the sensation that it's all a trick, it's all a trick and everything's a riddle and it's all backwards. You feel these things, but it takes so long to get your mind to expand that I now understand that the muse of reality is speaking to you but it's only speaking to me. Like my thing is only speaking to me. So the way that I would get these messages is like certain words would like float or like have glitter around them. And I was connecting it to the material thing. And it's the same thing where like Tame Impala wrote Let It Happen about the ascension, about what was about to happen in 2020. For us, he doesn't seem to think he wrote it for that reason.
Right.
He was a conduit, but like that song was the anthem of going into the underworld of 2020. But I no longer look to the artist. I did this for decades. Like, do they know what they're singing about? Do they know what they're talking about? And no, they don't.
And if they didn't, it's not to be like, oh, well, shit, I don't like that song anymore. It's actually like, no, there was like some secret kind of message that came in for you that activated you and opened you up. But the person's intention of writing that music was completely different. And that's what's so beautiful and paradoxical about it. It's
right. The way that the Matrix loads the things that you need.
Yeah.
But it's not connected to the actual physical thing. And I have so many examples that come to me every once in a while of things like that early in my awakening where I took things very literal, where it took me a really long time to learn how to read oracles in a way that wasn't super literal, super dualistic, super this or that.
Would you say that? I mean, I don't know if it has to be this solid, but what I almost everything that is of value in seeking it, like kind of all is metaphor and symbolism, right? Like at its core, it's not most things that have like this wealth of information that's activating is fully accessed through understanding the meaning behind it, the energy and the bigger picture that a poem is actually presenting. It's not the literal interpretations of these words. It's what is beyond that. That's where like it all is. So anything you take too literally, it's almost like, well, I think I'm limiting my understanding of this. I found that to be very true with a lot of spiritual texts, that, with the Bible, I still to this day, and even with some of the Greek pantheons of gods and stuff, when it's talking about a physical person or these like, combination of animal human hybrids, which I think also exists, but like so much part of the Bible that when it was like speaking literally and telling these stories, I was just always encouraged to be like, yeah, that was a different time, and that's just like the way it occurred. That's what they were doing. It never felt. I always had blocks inside of me that like there's something in here that's not supposed to be interpreted literal, and a lot of Christians don't interpret it. Well, they interpret parts of it as literal and then other parts as just metaphor. But I think in general, like I've found it to be most things that are really valuable to me are this deep metaphorical symbolism kind of concept. But it's so hard to sometimes not do the literal interpretation because it's tempting. Sometimes and this is like all prophecy is mostly, I think, it doesn't hit the mark when people literalize it so much. That again, it's like if you're talking about a higher being channeling something down or you're getting information from a higher realm, it's mostly going to have to be communicating through symbolism and metaphor, because it's like the language is clunky, and trying to get into like what the actual person is experiencing in that time, they have to use all of those languages and ideas to then convey this idea that's like kind of outside the literal context.
Well, it's also like it's material supremacy that it even matters physically, you know?
Right.
Who gives a shit? Nothing matters less now in 2024 than whether or not Jesus physically existed. But that's how like the material plane will have you thinking that that is the part that matters.
Right.
The impact of the metaphor over the next 2,000 years, what it has done to culture, what it is doing to human consciousness now matters more. Who gives a shit if it ever physically existed, because it doesn't currently physically exist. You know, it's the same thing with like, I remember for a long time I didn't tell people that I had a near-death experience, because up until the last 10 years, probably 8 years, if you said you had a near-death experience, people wanted proof of how long you were dead. They wanted to know what you were dead of, like whatever. And the reality is I can't even tell you what hospital I woke up at. And everybody I was around was all blasted out on drugs. And so
there was no context to like understand what you were saying. So then they just label you as cuckoo bananas, right?
Well, and when it happened, I stole the paperwork. But like obviously I walked out of addiction with a backpack, and it didn't include that paperwork. But I stole the paperwork because I knew that people weren't going to believe that I was dead. Wow. And anyone who was at that club will tell you I was dead. No, I didn't. I have nothing that I did drugs with. But so I didn't talk about the near-death experience. And then the aliens, people often wanted to know like details about the aliens that never felt relevant to me. And then now when I'm like, yeah, I always had the sensation that the aliens were just me in the future. And now I would say they only came to me as aliens because that is a mythology that I would resonate with, because I felt alien to this reality. Mm-hmm. Once again, categories of reason I didn't have. I used to lump Earth and the Matrix together because those were one thing to me until I had more categories of reason. When the alien said male and female would cease to exist, I didn't have a category of reason to even understand a construct of reality yet. And so I was still, everything was good box or bad box. And when they kept saying parameters, they didn't say constructs, they kept saying parameters. There are parameters of this game that you think are real, but they're not real. That took me decades to fucking understand. Decades of contemplation and personal experience to understand. And now I would say, and the fucking joke I used to make, like, our dick's going to fall off. I was taking it literally, like there won't be men and there won't be women. Now in 2024, male and female are not synonymous with masculine, and feminine are not synonymous with man and woman. Those are all three things that have their own definition to me.
Yeah.
And to be honest, they probably didn't say male or female, but those things were all the same thing to me. They probably were speaking more to, I guess it could have been any of them, but like masculine and feminine, I would say is energy. Male and female, I would say innie and outie, and man and woman are, depending on where you are in your belief system, these things are more fluid than I previously understood, but the constructs of these things were rigid in 2000. Right. The constructs of these things were rigid and they were seen as separate. Where I would now say that masculine and feminine energies are two ends of one polarity, and that everyone moving forward will embody, after we work out some of our programming around it, we will embody both masculine and feminine energy and understand how to use both. It wasn't, but I was adding all this weird...
Which that's what is derived from the metaphor, dicks will fall off.
Well, no, that was literally the question I asked.
No, but I'm just saying, like, that's the dicks are going to fall. It's going to be literal. But then it's like, no, it's that gauge of masculine and feminine energy is going to become more fluid and evolved, i.e. not just a dick.
Yeah, but we were deeply entrenched in the identity of these things, much of which was parameters from Christianity of like what it is to be a woman and what it is to be a man. And much of it was backwards. Much of the like mousy feminine stuff that I personally was programmed with, I didn't embody that, but I had a lot of guilt and shame about quote unquote not being the right kind of woman because Christianity says you're supposed to be soft spoken and submissive and whatever. And I've just never been those things.
Hey, Mark. That's how she talks to me sometimes. There was one point when we were shopping and I heard a man like 20 feet away say, "Hey, Mark." And I was like, what burly man is calling me? And I did it again. "Hey, Mark." I was like, what? I couldn't see anybody. And then she finally like popped out from around the clothes. Like, "Mark." I was like, holy shit.
I was trying to be quiet.
Yeah.
I was trying to yell for you from far away without yelling.
When you dropped into a low frequency, that brown note frequency, just. Ooh.
All right. Well, we're making. Can you help me? We're making homemade orange chicken tonight with gluten-free tempura in.
You think this is something they really want to know about?
Tallow. No. Anyway, I got to make dinner here soon. So
I'm going to go pee in a little bit. I'm also going to go do I'm going to work on music. I'm going to go get a snack in a little bit too. And then I'm probably going to itch the bottom of my foot. What else you want to tell them that you're going to go do today?
I was kind of telling you.
You already told me last night. We're having orange chicken tonight, homemade. We're bougie. It's actually not that bougie, but it's pretty.
Lily asked for it. So anyway, it's going to take 5 hours, and I need your help.
I didn't subscribe to this.
You didn't sign up for
My PDA is getting activated.
We'll talk about PDA next time. Pathological demand avoidance.
Public display of affection.
Yeah, it needs different initials because those ones are already taken. But this is a game changer for us to learn about this. But it'll have to be a conversation for another day. So where can people find you? They can find you now. You have your own Patreon that's free for people to connect.
Have you guys heard of this thing called Linktree? Just made one. It's pretty new. I know you guys might not know about it, but yeah, I finally made a Linktree on my Instagram. Welcome to 2024. But yeah, that's where everything that I am exists in link form there. So if you want sessions with me, I'm doing creative sessions. I also have a new tier now where you can just talk about whatever. A new session, you mean? Yeah, like a new session tier. Oh, not a tier. Yeah, that's Patreon. But a new session to, it doesn't have to be about human design, doesn't have to be about creativity. It can just be like, dude, let's talk about witches and warlocks. Here's my thoughts. And then I'll go, yeah, these are my thoughts. And then, I started a Patreon because I felt like I wanted to have another place to express some of these, shorter thoughts or ideas, book recommendations. I also really I've liked doing the Q&As on Jess's podcast on her Patreon. And I feel like I wanted to do that too, just to have a place to do a live kind of talk back and forth about things. I think it's the projector in me, loves being asked questions. It activates my own knowing. So that'll be part of that. I might even do some, share some like experimental type music that I've been starting to try to make more of. So it could be all and everything, but it's free, the Patreon, and it's just another place to kind of, connect on weird shit like this. And then Suitnop is the music that you hear on these podcasts that you can find on Spotify, Suitnop, Suitnop. And that's it.
I've got Jessa Reed on Instagram. That's my primary social. I'm also Jessa Reed on TikTok. I intermittently go on TikTok binges where I post a bunch of stuff mostly about overthrowing the government. And then jessareed.com, I do personal sessions. I think they're now just called Rent My Perspective for however long. And I'm not doing a lot of those now, though, because I'm pretty busy talking to microphones every single day. On the Patreon, I'm very busy. I've got a free tier where I just put thoughts and occasional podcasts. And then I've got a podcast tier and then an energy update tier and then a class. It's a lot. There's a lot of tiers now. For now, I don't know. I make it a lot of tiers and then I shrink the amount of tiers and then I go back depending on where I'm at. So
Tears on tears on tears.
Tears on tears on tears.
All
I've
right.
shed so many tears.
Peace, love, and tranquility.